I am here. I am here. Maybe I'm the only one, but I am here. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Happy Tuesday. For those in these United States, welcome back from Labor Day weekend. Hopefully you had the full 3-day weekend. I did. It was a nice break. Got to get back at it, though. I'm going to try to keep things on point because I got stuff going on this afternoon, so I don't have a ton of time to dilly-dally. No dilly-dallying, no fiddle-faddling. Just a particular program note you may have seen in the channel. In my community, the community tab of my channel, I'm going to be taking part, collaborating with Terrence from, who you may know from Homebrew Detritus, who also had that Pride interview with. He is a great artist I've recently discovered, a wonderful artist. And he hit me to this Swordtember, which I guess is this thing they run. I don't know how often they run it. In September's, like one prompt a day. It's all about swords. So there's a prompt, you draw a sword, and I'm writing the content to go along with these wonderful swords. I posted a sample, which was the first day to it also went to my Patreon, and I'll put it on Ko-fi and Reddit probably as soon as I'm done with this, but it's going to be running all month. I'm going to make it I haven't done anything for my patrons in a long time, and patrons, I apologize. Just putting out the content on the somewhat daily schedule kind of takes it out of me a bit, and I'm still trying to adjust how to get other things done. But this seemed, as I'm kind of behind on everything, this seems sort of like something I could do fairly quickly and easily. I think we've done 4 so far. That first one being Nightshade, which again is posted in the community tab of the channel, so you can check that out. When we get to the month, I'm not sure if we'll get all of them done or not. If Terrence has time, maybe we'll catch up on any we miss afterwards, right up. Maybe we'll put it out as a booklet, something like that. I think they're pretty good. Nightshade I thought was interesting, had a couple of neat elements. I try not to just make it just about adding a plus, plus whatever. I try to give it, not all of them have necessarily stories, though they might have the elements of one. That's certainly some hooks for stories, but a few things to make them a little bit more or less unique. They're not particularly balanced in any sort of way. I just kind of went with numbers that sounded okay to me. But take a look at Nightshade in those places, and if you dig it, certainly use it. Somebody already said, hey, this is cool, can I use it? I was like, of course. That's why I posted. But let's get to brass tacks, shall we, gentlemen, gentle people? We're back to Worlds Without Numbers, continuing our epic quest through this epic tome. Firmly now we can begin the section on ruins. I'm presuming it will follow the same format as the previous sections. I will read at least the starting paragraph just to get a sense of making sure we're all on the same page with the author. There's hardly an adventurer alive who doesn't like to explore an ancient ruin, so it's inevitable that you're going to be producing your fair share of crumbled keeps, Stygian tunnels, and sinister lost cities. The adventure creation tables that start on page 234 can help you flesh out the details of these adventure sites, but you need to have a general framework in place before you can use them effectively. The ruin tags in this section are useful in situating the ruin within the context of your own campaign world. Every tumbled down heap of stones came from somewhere, and it originally served a purpose more exalted than being looted by lawless sellswords. All right, so there we've got the context. And I guess they put this one straight up front. I don't remember the other ones if they put more stuff beforehand. Oh, and let me know, obviously, in the chat if audio levels or anything else is amiss. I know there were some audio issues during Friday's stream. So let me know if anything is amiss in that regard. So here we get to the, by now, standard set of generation tables. This one for ruins. Like in the past couple streams, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these by rote. I'm going to give you all the names of the tables. We'll go through kind of a selection if some of them seem interesting. But at this point, I think if you've watched any of the other streams about this stuff, it's going to be very similar to stuff we already covered for the other sections of this chapter. So we've got, what do the locals think of the ruins? How did it become ruined? Why hasn't it been plundered before yet? How old is it? What kind of ruin is it? And who used the ruin before? The order is kind of interesting. It's probably just to get it all typographically in place. So from what the locals think, we get options such as it's taboo, traditionally taboo, plays a role in a ritual, it's hated and feared, things like that. It's totally misunderstood. How did it become ruined? It could have been invaded and destroyed by enemies, strife from within, natural calamity, a plague or a curse, right? Things of that sort. Why hasn't it been plundered before? The environment around is very dangerous. It's cursed or plagued. It's believed to be inhabited by something fearsome or some things that are fearsome. People think it's already been looted. It's claimed by some local authority who maybe puts it off limits to normal, your everyday looters. How old is it? It's fresh, generations old, belonging to the unfathomable past. And then what kind of ruin is it? It could be a city or other major settlement, a temple, a monastery, or a pilgrimage site, a grand private residence or manor, a fortress or stronghold, a mine or tunnel system, a wizard's tower, right? We get the idea. Hey, nothing is already stepping into the chat here. Let's see. I use ruins to reinforce the theme / history of my setting. When I'm running a game in a golden age, there are few ruins. If the setting is a crumbling society, then there are lots of crumbling ruins. Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. And I think then you could have, depending on your setting, right? In a golden age, everything is kind of at its zenith, but you might be running into what I think one thing you can do with a golden age setting. And I always found this fascinating, and it's not even limited to the ancient world, right? People build on top of build on top of build. So even though we may be at the peak of society, generally speaking, it's built on older, potentially more primitive or less advanced, or just crumbling ruins of other things. So even though you might be living in the golden age, there might be something beneath, right beneath the wonderful, best, last version of the Temple of Solomon. There are earlier, more ancient temples of Solomon, not representing the golden age, but representing things leading up to it. And there might be things in there, though, that are still worth getting out. Sometimes the things that are less refined, in a sense, can be more powerful, or at least have more of a raw power, right? But it is a good point, right? You should match. Yeah, if you're playing in a post-apocalyptic kind of campaign setting, there should be tons of ruins around. You're living in the ruins every day. And then we get who used the ruins before. Rebels against the local leader, bandits or other criminal outcasts, religious zealots, hapless garrison of local troops, some kind of monstrous entities, an invading war band, intelligent monsters, restless undead. So a lot of good choices. Now we're getting into some of the tags. Ruins of ancient deeps. Or maybe these are kind of subsections. So never mind. Sorry. Scratch that. We're into kind of subsections. So we have a couple of these. I think these are more related to that latter Earth settings. So maybe I'll skip past these, especially since I'm somewhat pressed for time today. But just for completeness, we've got Ruins of Ancient Deeps. And I'll just read the little bit here, which kind of defines a bit what an ancient deep is, or at least what a deep is. Deeps vary enormously in size, from innumerable small refuges that once sheltered human escapees and isolated esoteric experiments to vast delvings that sheltered 1 million humans or more. I don't know if these mean that they're underground, like in an Underdark situation, or just deep pits, but I suppose we could make of them what we will. Hey, Linkian. Hey, how are you, Linkian? Linkian says, all D&D settings are implied post-apocalyptic settings. Who built these dungeons and made these magic items? Yes. Yeah, I think when I was referring to post-apocalyptic, I was thinking more in the sort of in the Thundar sense, where you're literally tromping through all the time through ancient ruins. At least that's how my images of Thundar the Barbarian, which I'm supposed is dating myself yet again, but that one it seemed like everything was essentially in the shadows of ruins. But yes, you are correct that there was some kind of ancient apocalypse, or apocalypse in some part of the past that created all the dungeons we're going into. Though some of them they would keep getting kind of built. But yeah, I guess ultimately Mad Max D&D is always fun. I've never played a Mad Max D&D setting. The closest I got was a little bit I played of a Shadows of the Demon Lord setting that seemed to be in kind of a Mad Max-ish world. Hey, Terrence. I love Thundar. Yep, Thundar is cool. I have the complete DVD. I bought it a while back, but I haven't really had a chance to delve into it too much. I'm kind of hoping to play with my daughter or play through them with my daughter at some point. I also have Land of the Lost in there. That'd be a great mashup, right? Thundar plus Land of the Lost. I mean, it's not really much to mash up. They're kind of, I feel like there are dinosaurs in Thundar. If there weren't dinosaurs in Thundar, there ought to have been. At least I'm sure there's dinosaur-like things. All you need to do is add some slee stacks, and you're good to go. Ruins of Jikegida, not sure, but I'm going to pass over these because, like I said, these seem to be tied into that specific setting. We get some more. These are definitely setting. So we'll skip over the ones that are tied tightly to the Ladder Earth. I think it's what's called Ladder Earth setting. Now we get to the actual ruin tags. Again, there's about 100 of these, and I'm not going to read through all of them. I'm just going to pick a smattering. We've seen them before, so we understand kind of what we're getting. Stuff like Ancient Archives, Automaton Servants, a Birthing Cyst. Ooh, a Birthing Cyst. Bitter Remnants, a Cyclical Doom, an Experimental Lab, Religious Zealots, Shifting Interior, Spatial Flux. Get the Flux Capacitor going. Surfacer Hideout. Bunch of stuff, right? So I do want to read Birthing Cyst. All right, let's see if I can remember the acronym or the things. What is it? Enemies, friends. What was C? I know T is things. P is places. C. What was C? I'm spacing out on C. So we have these E, F, C, T, P. I think C, E is enemies. I think F are friends. C, maybe things we could take away from it. Or something. I don't remember. This is the problem when you, or I wish they would just squeezed it in down here somewhere. Just to remind me what these things are. But let's read the text for Birthing Cyst. A horrible thing is growing in the ruin and will eventually erupt into some catastrophic peril or awful creature. The ruin may have been originally designed to facilitate this thing's creation, or could have been infested or perverted by some outside power. Outsiders may not realize the nature of the peril, or even mistake its growth for some positive process. The growth could be the product of some ancient science, a magical ritual, or conflux of geomantic forces. So there we go. Now, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Dana Barrett's apartment in Ghostbusters, or that building where the crazed, the sort of crazed madman had constructed the building to facilitate the arrival of Gozer at some point in the future, and now Gozer's showing up. Okay, so for enemies, we have the God Beast to be born for a long dead faith. Terrence says, a dungeon that can only be defeated by Dr. Pimple Popper. There you go. Gozer the Gozerian. So we get the God Beast to be born for a long dead faith, obsessed ancient keeper, outsider determined to provoke the catastrophe for their own end. So those are your antagonists. And then the friendlies, worried local observers, last surviving keepers of the ruin, survivors of an early eruption of it. As if there are some, quakes, as it were, some little tremblors before the big thing happens. And then we have C, which I just can't remember what it is, but it's clearly stuff you can take out of there. Or, I don't know, it's C. It's not places, it's not things. Something else. Anyway, we got the things growth provides some profitable byproduct. People are completely mistaken about what's growing down there. People think it's already hatched and was dispatched. So they're almost like rumors or elements. I wish I should remember what C meant. And then T, things, item needed to harm or kill the thing, key to halt or abort the process. Precious offerings made to the unborn disaster by fearful observers, and then places the arcane lab where it's growing, fortified chambers to guard it, shrine depicting its eventual glory. Eventual glory! So there we go. That is the Birthing Cyst. Okay, we get Bitter Remnants, Civil War, Decrepit Structure. Let's see. Distant Gate. Ooh, some kind of connection, like a Stargate or a not Stargate. Experimental lab, false front. Let's see, I'm just going to go through these. Hive-minded natives. That's interesting. Hospitable natives. Invincible delusion. Let's read invincible delusion. The natives of this ruin are totally convinced of something that is simply not the case. Their ancient empire never fell. Their god has commanded them to live a certain troublesome way. They are the only true humans left in the world, or some other delusion that's likely to cause problems. They've developed rationalizations to explain obvious contradictions to their error, many of which involve hostile responses to bearers of iniquitous falsehood, right? If you can't kill the message, kill the messenger. Many of which involve, got that part. There may be something about the ruin that's enforcing this delusion. And see, for enemies, we have hypnotically charismatic leaders, crazed ancient lich rulers, leader who knows the truth but profits by the error. So they obviously have a reason to keep this farce going. And then friendlies might be suspicious natives, an outsider trying to convince them, an outsider who they've mistakenly incorporated into their error. And then, let's see, we have, I don't know what the C means anymore, but these are kind of rumors or maybe elements. The delusion makes an otherwise unendurable life bearable. The delusion is true in some critical ways. The delusion is somehow infectious. Ooh, an infectious groove, if you will. And then we have things, proof of the delusion's falsehood, precious goods piled up for a lost cause, relic of a golden age. And then finally some places. A ruined chamber made a pathetic mimicry of some greater place, ritual chambers to celebrate the truth, quote-unquote truth, right? The kind of false truth. Archive containing troublesome records. Let's see if any of these other ones are spatial flux. Space, I'm not going to read all the things, but I'll just read the little blurb here. Space within the ruin has been folded, altered, or corrupted in some way, either by ancient magics, inauspicious geomancy, the depredations of a dimensional monster, failed workings, fumbled sorcery, or some other woe. Yeah, kind of like the TARDIS, right? Taboo place, a wizard's lair. All right, we got that. So now we can move on to the wilderness. Wilderness girls. Into the wilderness. It's not uncommon for GMs to have difficulty in fleshing out the wilderness parts of a hex crawl or exploration-based campaign. One forest tends to look a lot like another, and there's only so many times one can go to the well of inexplicable magical effect randomly occurring here before it starts to get stale. Rural villages, lost ruins, and other social or dungeon-esque points of interest can dot the countryside, but without something interesting in the spaces in between, mere distance fails to provide much useful adventure grist. This is, I would say, it's fairly true, and it's something that comes up a lot, right? How does one keep woods interesting? I think one thing you can do, which it doesn't necessarily look like they're doing here, is you can dot it, get some of those minor features. I think you can look at the D30 companion, which I covered not super long ago. You can check the video on that. They have tables where you can do things like, okay, you're in the woods, but in this particular woods, there's maybe a stream or a ravine, a pit, a hill, different things, maybe groves full of strange flowers, things of that sort. Of course, your wandering monsters, you can kind of embed them, right? If you think about if you do two of those at once, you can think about making sort of a triangle of an encounter, right? If there's not just one side, but two sides before the PCs show up. So maybe there are gnolls fighting owlbears, or they fought owlbears, and the PCs show up while it's happening, maybe, or after it's over. In which case, what's the aftermath look like? Who won? Where did those survivors go? That can make for interesting stuff. Of course, you could throw in the odd tower, mine, hole in the ground, little mini dungeon that just is not something epic enough or interesting enough to have brought proper notice, but they picked that up. And of course, you can always, if it is just woods and for reasons of your own, you say, look, there's absolutely nothing here, then just pass on through, right? You spend the evening in a lovely wood during the golden hours of after dawn. And by lunchtime at the edge of the wood, you go into, and there's the next area, right? Don't have to draw it out. If there really is nothing keeping them interested and keeping you interested, then no need to draw it out. Just pass on through. Pass on through like a gentle fart in a spring breeze. All right. Wilderness encounters. While it's useful to lay down some wilderness points of interest for a hex crawl or wilderness exploration game, not everything needs tags and full development. Sometimes you just need a few random encounters on a list to pull from when the PCs can run into something. This is true. So we're getting some encounter tables. Each of these is a D12. Kind of laid out similar to the ones in, say, BX or something, where they'll give you. It's not quite the same, but they kind of the way in BX. I think in OD&D also they'll kind of get you roll for types, and each type has its own table. Here they've taken away the types, or you're not rolling randomly for the type, but you have a table for human encounters, beasts and monsters, non-human, but intelligent encounters, and then, or at least those three, and then it looks like some things about what's going on. So they do have two tables with kind of what's happening with the sapient encounters or what's happening with the beasts, right? So you're helping you add in that context of, hey, they're not just hanging around picking their noses waiting for the party to show up. They're actively doing something. So for human encounters, it's a D12. I'm not going to read them all, but you get the kind of stuff you imagine, right? Lost merchants or peddlers, hermits, escaped slaves or escaped prisoners, a peasant, an outlaw, an explorer, a miner, just a noble, a pilgrim, right? That kind of thing. For non-human sapient encounters, could be raiders, could be scouts, could be a patrol, could be a campsite. I'm assuming by non-human sapients, they mean things like your orcs, goblins, that kind of thing. You could kind of combine them together because they could be human raiders, they could be human scouts, could be a human campsite, or it could be a goblin peasant, an orc explorer or surveyor. It's probably no reason to split them up, but of course, use them however you will. And then in the beasts and monsters table, also a D12, some kind of harmless but annoying local creature, a hungry pack hunters, a stalking predator, a sick or enraged predator, an ambush predator, an uncanny or eldritch monster, some kind of flying monster, maybe a pair of team hunters, a ghost or other undead. And now, what's happening with the intelligent creatures? They're arguing hotly over something. They're pausing for a meal. They're making far too much noise. They're interrogating a prisoner. They're fleeing some other pursuer. They're looking for something to steal. And there's other ones. And then with the beasts, it's wounded from a hunt. It's magically warped. It's being chased by something bigger. It's attacking somebody right now. It's well-fed and disinclined to hunt. Looks deceptively harmless. So on and so forth. So some good things. You notice here, no specifics are given. I know there's a monster manual-ish type section here, but they're not giving you, these are not those tables. Unless we're going to see them, of course, on the next page. Do we? We don't. Now we get to tags. And some of these are tied to their setting. Most of them aren't. We get stuff like, again, it's 100. Just a few of these: abandoned village, a cursed land, a criminal meet, a rampant experiment, a refugee camp, a remote monastery, a ruined fort, a savage hamlet, sculpted terrain, seductive peril, toxic ruins. And there's more, many more. Just a few of these I will read through. I'm going to skip the enemy friends, whatever C means again, things and places. They tend to be pretty vague. I think they're helpful when you'll actually be going through these, but I feel like as far as me reading them out, I'm not sure they're particularly enlightening. And we've seen this is the same pattern we've seen for others of these tags. Let me know if you want me to read over all of them. I mean, all those bullet points. I'm just going to pick some just to read the blurbs. Let's see what looks good. Cursed land. This site has been cursed. Rather than being a simple xenoformed Aratu, okay, so I think that's some kind of the anti-terraformed area. Some malevolent magic has laid a persistent, dangerous affliction on the area. Creatures may be warped, inhabitants may be plagued, terrible luck might strike all passers-by, or natural physical processes might be perverted. There should be something valuable or attractive here, or else few people would have any reason to engage with the location. This is true, though it could be that you have to get through the cursed land to get somewhere else, at least without spending a whole lot of extra time. So that could be another carrot to encourage people to, or at least encourage the party to pursue it, right? You can go around, but it's going to take you 4 extra days, and you don't have 4 extra days. So it looks like you got to go through. But sure, it does make sense that as an adventuring location, if you want them to explore why the land is cursed and how maybe to undo the curse or how to deal with the curse, then yeah, there's got to be why. If it's just a giant annoying hazard, just go around. Go around, go the other way. Devil Grove. While not a full-fledged Aratu, which I don't know what that is, there's a glade or zone within the Hex that's infested with outsider flora and fauna. So I think we could read that as, right, demonic, devilish, hellish. Beasts from within prowl the surrounding area, though some circumstances preventing the glade from growing at a very rapid pace. Some ancient device may be causing the glade, or it might be the tiny remnant of some ancient wasteland that's shrunken with time and the constraint of the legacy. Or it could be that there's some kind of active outside force that's keeping it at bay. If you remember one of my recaps, I talked about that, how there was a wood with this nasty mist in it, and there was a shrine in the wood, and that shrine kept the mist at bay around the shrine. As long as you left the shrine alone, you could camp there, sit there, nothing from the forest, that the wood, the mist wouldn't come in, things wouldn't leave you alone. But of course, my party, what did they do? They messed with it, broke the spell, and destroyed that area. So you could see that same thing as sort of an inverted version. I mean, in my sense, my Devil's Grove, if you will, did have boundaries, but I had this one area inside of it that was given a little bit of a protection. Let's see. Disused mines, historical survival, labyrinthine tangle, lost cities, lost battlefields, magical springs, classic magical springs, monstrous beasts. Let's see what else we have. Pilgrimage sites, remnants of roads. I always like those. Refugee camps. Rural monasteries are always good to be kind of creepy, but potentially useful. Sculpted terrain. All right, I'll read this one. Sculpted terrain. In a former age, some tyrant or artist sculpt an entire landform here into a statue, monument, or artwork that is visible for miles. A carved mountainside, a molded hill, or an intricate pattern of waterways, a mesa pierced with music-emitting tunnels, or some other huge artwork is obvious here, and probably can be seen from any point nearby. Such structures likely have some form of defense to prevent their vandalism and may contain components that are very valuable in the present age. I really like the idea of the mesa pierced with music-emitting tunnels. That sounds very cool. I could see using that, and you could really weave in this concept of, as they're moving around the area, hearing the strange music that is coming, and if they follow the music, they'll get to the place. Pretty cool, and it could be a giant burial. So maybe someone's buried there, and that's the way they wished to be remembered. So there might be just loot there, or it could be an interesting idea of being able to pull up components of prior technology or magics and ripping them out like so much copper tubing. I think I don't need to read. I think that's good, right? Twisted fauna. We've kind of seen uncanny weather. I think we get that. Zealot colony. Yep. Okay. Using this game in other settings. All right. So I don't know if we need to go into this part of it. Right? Do we need to do? Are people interested in? We've only just been going through the campaign creation stuff, and other than a few call-outs to their setting, right? It's not totally setting agnostic, but it is, I would say, mostly setting agnostic. And I don't think I'd have much problem. Just outsider is just, I would maybe, it could just be alien, right? Literally from the stars, or it could be from another plane, depending on how I want to portray that particular piece. Some of the things I would have to look up, like the Aratu, I'm not sure what that is referencing, but I don't think it's a big deal. So I'm not worried particularly about this, but it's nice to know if you get this, it's telling you, hey, here's how you can adapt, reskin, import spells. Okay, now we're getting some more stuff. Now, okay, I'm halfway through the hour. Let's see how far I can get. This section, chapter, I think might be what we call this? Is this a chapter? I can't tell. Chapter, or at least major section. Creating adventures. Adventures are where all the sweat, toil, and fevered thought of the GM finally becomes something real at the table. No matter how finely sculpted your world or inventive your fiction, If you can't deliver a playable bit of fun at the table, then your job as a GM is not done. This is true. And here we get some they bolded bits of text, kind of bullet point-ish. I'm just going to read the bolded bits. Or actually, first I'll read a little intro and then the bolded bits. Yet, GMing does not have to be some special province of voice acting improv artists. Oh, who was he thinking of there? And no, I don't think he's calling anybody out, but I think he is calling out this idea that people who feel like, oh, I'm not, what's his name from Critical Role, I can't be a good DM. And no, it's not about that, right? Not about your ability to voice act or do that kind of stuff. Almost anyone can be a perfectly good GM with the right techniques and a complementary group of players, and there are certain rewards to being a sandbox GM that can't be had from the player side of the screen, which is I totally agree with. So now let's get to his bullet points. The GM gets to be surprised. The GM gets to pick the situations. The GM always has something to do. All true. All right, you get to be surprised. You don't know what's going to happen. I think some GMs that spooks them, and I don't want to get too out in the weeds on this, but I do think it's something that I think there are people who don't want to be surprised. That they and maybe it is in terms of how they're prepping, and that they're prepping in a linear fashion, so that they have going to go through A to B to C to D. And if the party starts to interfere where it looks like they're going to jump from D to Z or just D to off the alphabet to number 1, which you haven't even prepped yet, it's a scary sense of surprise. It's the surprise of, oh gosh, not only is that area blank, but I had wrapped my enjoyment around this linear process. So you have to work to decouple your enjoyment from this idea of my story being told. Isn't it going to be great how they're going to go to the village and they're going to talk to this guy, and then they're going to get ambushed by that guy, and then they're going to make friends with this lady, and she's going to lead them to this place, and then they're going to do this thing, and they're going to get this thing back, and then they're going to go confront that guy, and it's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. Oh, what a twist. What a turn. And then the party comes in and just mucks it all up. And I don't even, and maybe even mucks it all up is probably not even doing them justice. It just does other things, decide that they want to do things in different order, decides that the person that you would set up to be the twist who is going to betray them, they figure it out from jump and they attack that guy in the street, or just decide to freeze them out of their decision process or ignore what they say. Something else that turns your whole concept right on its head. If your enjoyment is wrapped up on them following the story, you're apt to be very disappointed, and you're going to be unprepared for when they muck up the works. And that's when I think you start to make those poor decisions of, I'm going to start pushing them back in. Oh, they didn't talk to the guy. Well, I need them to talk to the guy so that guy can come back around and he can be available here. So I need to be introduced in this A segment because he's going to come back at D, and it doesn't make sense if he shows up in D if they haven't met him in A. So wherever they go, this guy's going to keep butting his head in and saying, hello, can I talk to you now? Right? And every time you try to do that, it becomes more obvious that you're pushing this guy on the party. And sometimes the party will relent and say, okay, we're going to talk to this guy because he keeps showing up. Or they might just say, yeah, this guy's no good. He's following us around. He's clearly trying to get in our heads. Now we know even more that this guy's not to be trusted. Let's kill him now. Let's do something else, right? If you take your enjoyment from saying, I'm just going to put them in essentially set up a scenario, drop them in, and then my fun's going to be about, well, what the heck are they going to do in here? Then a lot of those issues fall away. Doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that come up. It means you have to be somewhat more prepared, or prepared in different directions in different manner. But I think there is something to that kind of surprise. But again, I think that's something that some GMs have to grow into, and they may not understand that when they think about running a sandbox campaign, about what that means for their role, how they're going to have fun, what they're going to get to do, and then stuff that maybe they shouldn't do. Right? And as I said, GM's going to get to pick the situation. You're going to be doing everything with the scenario. You're going to be setting up. I usually the overarching scenario, I think, is that session 0 thing. You're going to talk to the party. Hey, do you guys want to be buccaneers on the high seas? Great. I'm going to run that. If you're not, I'm not going to run it. I'm not going to have it in my brain. And then whatever you guys do, suddenly you're buccaneers on the high seas. That's right. But within that, you're going to get to set up all the kind of scenario stuff, and before they have a chance to even set foot in it. And of course, you are always going to have stuff to do. There's always going to be stuff to think about, things to prepare, consequences to riff off of, etc., etc. I'm going to skip the using existing adventures section. I guess I'll read the first paragraph and we'll see. Using existing adventures, this game is built on a quote-unquote an old school chassis, taking many of its basic concepts from the BX edition of the biggest role-playing game of the 70s and 80s. I mean, let's face it, it's also the biggest role-playing game of the 90s and aughts and 10s and 20s, but, you know, there it is. 6 attributes ranging from 3 to 18. Okay, they're just basically saying, they're saying D&D without saying D&D. As a working GM, you should take ruthless advantage of this. Almost 50 years of published adventure modules and homebrew adventures exist for you to pillage for your own campaign. Many of them available for free or cheaply in PDF online. Virtually any adventure published before 2000 for D&D can be used for Worlds Without Number with no more effort than converting Descending AC and THAC0 or to hit Armor Class 0 scores to this game scale and turning gold piece values into silver piece values. Yep, you can. Okay, right. So saying, hey, you got, and there's some artwork of, it looks like somebody stabbing down into a dragon or maybe a demon. Very nice. Okay, so now we're into, all right, so I'm going to bounce, I'm going to switch to myself. Here we go. Hold on, I'm going to turn off the sharing for a minute. Hello. Just so I can exit out of full screen view in the PDF and see what next bit to cover. Let's see. Get out of there. So that is the, or maybe I should I? Well, I was going to say, should I stop here? Should I not stop here? No, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop till my body drops, or at least until I get to an hour. I'm trying to see if there's anything. Let's see. Get to planning and running adventures. All right. That was not a good idea. Putting that in my mouth. All right, that's going to be misunderstood. Putting the whatever this part of my glasses in my mouth, not a good one. I just washed them recently, but I don't know. All right. With that out of the way, that little disgusting diversion out of the way, we're back to planning and running adventures. Some experienced GMs will have their own well-tested habits for creating and running adventures for their group. Others need a little more guidance, however, and so this section explains how a GM might go about preparing an evening's adventure and the steps such a creator will need to go through in order to brew up a suitable session's worth of fun. I like the use of the term brew there, right? Homebrew, but it often gets used as a noun. Nice to see it as a verb. And so we're going to get some, I'm guessing this is going to be relatively or absolutely generic advice. Let me know in the chat if anything's coming up I need to be aware of, or if any questions, or you're seeing anything you'd wish I'd spend more time on, or if you want me to skip. Let me know. Unlike folks who listen to or watch this later, only you in the chat have a voice. Only you can prevent forest fires. So subheading number 1, sandboxes and story arcs. The tools in this section are meant to support a quote-unquote sandbox style of campaigning, and for some GMs this might need a little explanation. Sandbox gaming is relatively less popular than the more prevalent quote-unquote story arc style of play, but has a long and splendid tradition of fun behind it. All right, do we want to read through what he's saying a sandbox campaign is? And I don't mean to say that like I'm going to disagree with him, but just, I feel like most of my audience is pretty well grasped on sandbox and story arcs. But I guess I'll read at least the first paragraph or so, and then if folks chime in, they want to hear more, or if we skip ahead, I'll skip ahead. A sandbox campaign is built with no presumption of an overarching plot or direction. The PCs are not particularly chosen by destiny, and their fates are wholly undirected by narrative fiat. Each PC has their own goals, motivations, and hopes, and it's the GM's job to provide them with interesting situations and engaging adventures in which they might strive to carry out their plans. Some will succeed, and others will perish hideously, perhaps of no greater crime than sufficiently bad luck. Very true. The campaign world shifts and reacts to the PC's actions, and the overall goal of the party might change from one session to the next. Also very true. And then in terms of story arc, he says, story arc campaigns are built around a particular plot line or narrative thread. The campaign is about how the heroes deal with that plot and the actions they take in response to the inevitable events and situations that the narrative thrusts upon them. It is tacitly assumed that all the PCs are going to get involved in the plot and cooperate with it at least to at least a basic level. They won't simply decide to wash their hands of the affair and go hunt monsters 2 nations away. Also true. Nothing says we know sandboxes. Yeah, I figured you do, but it's always nice. I feel like it's always interesting to see people's definitions. I don't have anything really to quibble about his definitions of either one. It is good, I think, to lay out here, not just in terms of the GM, but in terms of something to talk to your party about, because you will get. I mean, I see the questions every day. Help! I thought my party was going to go do this, or they were supposed to do that, and instead they have decided to go off to another continent and go monster hunting. Right? What is that disconnect? It's maybe they have a different understanding of what kind of game they're playing than you do, or maybe they all agreed on a story style campaign, but they got bored with it. It wasn't interesting. The world maybe is really interesting to them, and they just don't care about the plot. Right? There are lots of reasons beyond just sandbox versus narrative where you get some kind of disconnect. My players have gone back and forth between being very interested in kind of the more world events that you could say, oh, that's a story arc. And the other times they decide, we've lost the thread on that, or it's kind of beyond us at the time. So we're going to go back to doing stuff that's more profitable for us at a local level. Right? I feel like with Sandbox, you can kind of have multiple story arcs happening. There's just not one. Right. Whereas with a story campaign, there might be one. That part of your story arc could be out monster hunting for a while. Right. Something's happening. You got to go deal with that. And that involves spending a month monster hunting before the next bit comes in. Let's see what else is going on in the chat. John Lennon. Welcome, Mr. Lennon. Maybe the DM should give players clear goals. Sure. Yep. Absolutely. And I do try to. What I like to do is try to engage the players in coming up with their own goals. I usually will give them, especially with new players, maybe one initial goal. Hey, this is something you should try to do, or this is something that you're going to be tasked with doing at the start. Helps get their feet wet, does help give them some initial direction, because it is easy to get kind of a deer in the headlights look when you're just sort of dropped into place and the GM's just looking at you. Okay, what do you want to do? And it's that situation, that analysis paralysis, but also if all options look the same, then it doesn't look like you really have any options. It's similar, right? If someone drops you in the desert, you don't know which way it leads out of the desert, and the GM goes, okay, which way do you want to walk? And it's just, you can walk any way in the compass. I mean, you can literally turn 360 degrees, walk whichever way, but each direction looks exactly the same, and there's nothing defining anything being better or worse. You have no information. It's either going to pick randomly, you might just sit down, just decide, well, I'm just going to die here. Right? I'm going to sit down and die. So having some kind of goal is nice, though. Ultimately, I like to try to have the players come up with their own goals, because I want stuff that they are going to feel about, not stuff that they think I want, or stuff that they might resent me for giving to them, right? Because I don't know ultimately what they want. They may not know what they want. Hopefully, as they discover it, they can come up with their goals themselves. Now, nothing says, haha, my players have washed their hands and left the plot several times. Not a problem, just make a new story. Yep. Yeah, right? The old story can continue going at its own pace, and maybe the bad guy, whoever the bad guy of that story is, will simply win it unopposed, or at least unopposed by anything by the players. And then, new stories unfold, and they can come back and find out, well, hey, what happened? We were going to help that town, and then we didn't. What happened to it? Oh, you mean the town that vanished in a puff of smoke, and now there's a rift leading to the 9 hells there? Oh, yeah, that's what happened, right? Preparing your adventure. When you sit down to prepare a session's adventure, you can follow the steps below to help produce something playable in a reasonable amount of time. As you grow more experience with the process, you can start adjusting it to better fit your own interests and skills, but using it as written will work fine for first-time GMs. So again, he's got some bold types, somewhat like bullet points. I'm just going to read those. We identify the purpose of the adventure, pick a primary challenge for the adventure, use the challenge tools, which is stuff in this section, to flesh out this primary challenge, add extra layers of challenges, stitch the challenges together, identify rewards and consequences. Whoops. So there you have it. So that's I think a fairly good kind of bulleted list, right? He is giving you a specific order to do things, right? What is it about? Figure out the kind of the main thrust of the challenge, You can kind of add, right, the challenge, ultimate challenge, let's say, of I don't know, Indiana Jones at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? What's the ultimate challenge of that ruin he's going into? It's to get that idol at the end of it, or at the center of it, or whatever. Right? Go through, get the idol, and escape. And then, of course, when you look at the other challenges, you've got the angry locals who have been sort of egged on by what's his name, Belloc, which we don't really find out afterwards, but we do know that he's being sort of trailed by locals who are not necessarily happy that he's come to do this. There are the challenges, individual sections of the rooms before and after the idol. Then, of course, escaping from those again, and also the hireling that goes bad, right? So you can look at that, and then, of course, right, stitching the challenges together, making sure they all flow from one to the other. What are the rewards? In that case, the idol. What are the consequences? Potentially capture, potentially death, potentially the idol ending up with a competing archaeologist, so on and so forth. Right? Right. Now we get to running your adventure. Once you have your adventure built, you're ready to present it to the party. Every group will have its own taste when it comes to face-to-face play versus virtual tabletops, or the use of digital devices at the table, or who brings the snacks, and such matters are best discussed and agreed on beforehand. Despite these universal imponderables, the GM should keep the few things in mind when actually running the adventure in a sandbox style of play. All right, so here are the bullet points now for this. Don't force outcomes. Have filler ready. Find out what they want to do next session. Update your world after the session. These are all excellent pieces of advice. I want to say the two that I think is key. Find out, or maybe two. Don't force outcomes, right? It's a sandbox. No particular story is precious. Let the dice fall where they may. If the party does something with those villagers and takes them off the table, or the locals, right, in the kind of Indiana Jones style scenario, takes them and Belloc off the table early, don't force, now there's another group of villagers that are angry at them. No, just they took that off the table. They did it. They were smart. They were canny. They could have just been lucky. Plenty of bad luck's going to come their way. If some good luck comes their way, let them have it. Let them enjoy it, because those dice are going to keep rolling, and they're going to roll against them at least as much as they're going to roll for them. So let it go. And the other one is, I think, doesn't get taken advantage of enough, particularly in the age in which we live. Find out what they want to do in the next session. I see all these things about people all the time, posts, places, people guessing. I don't know what my party wants to do. I'm trying to figure out where they want to go. I don't know if they want to do the A, B, or C. I have to prep 5 places because I don't know which 5 places they're going to go to. Ask your players. Everybody's got phones. Half the world is playing remotely now. Everyone's got email, Discord, text messages, Messenger, whatever chat app you're using. Ask them. At the end of the session, ask them. 2 days later, ask them. Say, hey, in Discord, whatever your group chat method is, say, hey, let me know where you're going to go next session. Let me know by Friday. Sometimes I'll say, hey, I'm going to assume you're doing X, because that seemed to be what you were talking about. So here's what I usually do. Okay. I'm listening to the party during the session, as we all should be listening. And maybe towards the end, or even wherever, depending on what they're doing, if it's kind of a prep-ish section where nothing is actively happening, they're kind of getting ready for the next thing. Maybe they're talking about it. And I will say something like, okay, let me know what you guys want to do. If you need a particular date, say, hey, we're playing on next Wednesday. Let me know by this Friday which thing you're going to do. Or I'm assuming you guys are going to place A. So if you guys aren't going to place A, that's cool. Get together. Let me know by Friday at midnight, because Saturday is when I'm going to kind of lock that part in, if you want to. I don't usually mention locking anything in, because for my style with the kind of short kind of games I'm playing, is I can sort of fly by the seat of my pants well enough for this. But if I needed it to be more, I needed to be more definitive what their choice is, ask them. You don't need to put yourself in a limbo until your next session. Just ask them. We have all these tools to communicate easily across sessions. Use them. Abuse them. And then, of course, update your world, right? Look at all the consequences. what did all my players muck up with last session? Write them down. Maybe give them some kind of timeline. Don't make things happen too fast. Let the slow boat, right? Okay, so they killed the local lord's brother. Think about, well, how long would it take for word to get to the local lord who lives a hex over, and maybe they're off doing it. You say, okay, maybe it'll take a couple of weeks. And then they have to figure out their plan. So it might be a month in game time before some consequences come up. But just start keeping track of them. Write them down as fronts. Some other way you could add dice. Okay, on a D8, 1 and 8 or an 8 and 8. If I roll an 8 on a D8, then this consequence is going to come up, right? But just keep track of them. Make sure the world is continually evolving, and that will make the world feel alive to your players. And I think that will make them think about their actions more once they start to see that their actions are having consequences. I believe they will start to act in terms of, they will start taking that into consideration, right? All right, you know what? I'm at 51 minutes. Let me see. Oval Patrol. Hey, Oval Patrol. Had a moment to say I'm enjoying the stream. Can't get too chatty since I'm on the road, but I'll leave a like. Hey, thanks. Yes, please leave a like. If you're in here, go ahead, leave a like. If you happen to be listening to this or watching this and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And if you're listening to this in podcast form later on and you haven't left me a review, please leave me a review. I could use some reviews for the podcast. I am trying to stick within about an hour more or less. I'm just going to peek forward to see how big this section is. All right, this is a bigger. Okay, I'll try to get through this. I'm going to get through this. Maybe, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. A smidge. All right, so let's do this. Creating combat challenges. Combat challenges revolve around situations where a hard fight is a likely outcome for the PCs. They may have a burning desire to murder some hated enemy, or they might be facing a creature that has no capacity for peaceful interactions. Or you might simply know your party well enough to know there's no way they're going to let that particular NPC live once they find out what they're like. All right, so you have created something, or you know something's coming where they're definitely going to fight. You can say that with certainty, which I think, it happens, right? In my game, I know that if certain situations show up, if certain things happen or certain people make certain moves, if the situation will arise where the party could fight them, they're going to fight them, right? So I think as you play with your party more and more, I think you'll probably find those same things to be true. Let's see. Okay, so the logical essentials. The first step to think about the target and any surrounding protectors or associates. The first step is to think about the target and any surrounding protectors or associates it might have. A rich merchant will have guards at their estate. A cult leader will have fanatical minions, and so on and so forth. It's a great temptation to worry about quote-unquote balance when plotting out these details. If there are 40 combat-capable folk in the tribe, it's ridiculous to suppose that an ordinary band of novice heroes will be able to kill them all in a single pitched battle. As a consequence, the GM is tempted to shave down the number of foes for 2 weak parties or add in extra muscle to give a good fight to a more experienced band. The assumption is that if there is a combat challenge in an adventure, the PCs ought to have some non-trivial chance of beating it in a fight or a non-trivial chance of incurring grave losses. GMs in a sandbox campaign are encouraged to fight this instinct. Your job is to make a logical, coherent world that can be engaged with by intelligent and observant players. Yep, I agree all about that, right? I don't try to think about, what's a balanced encounter? No, I think about if you're the Goblin King of this tribe, how many warriors would you have? How many guards would you have? And that's it. And then it's up to the party to figure out if they feel like they need to find and defeat the Goblin King. They got to find out how to do it. Maybe they can. This is where you get those scenarios, right? Where you say, the prince, and this is stuff you see, and it's one of those tropes, right? Where is this? Someone who's observing the comings and goings of the Goblin King may notice that the Goblin King likes to go hunt. And on those hunting excursions, they take a smaller party. So what do? You try to ambush the Goblin King while they're out hunting, whatever it is they're hunting. You try to bribe some of the guards to get them to join your side, right? This is where you get all those really interesting solutions. Nothing says, I like balancing being framed as a temptation. How true. Yep. It is definitely a temptation. Framing the environment. Once you know who might be involved in the fracas, you should think about the location the conflict might occur in and the kind of information you need to establish about it. A merchant's house will require a map of the grounds. A sinister high priest lurking in a deep will necessitate a plan of the subterranean passages. And a murder in the midst of some highly populated area will inevitably draw some sort of hue and cry from the surrounding inhabitants to be kept in mind, right? So you got to build up your environmental context. Where do you think this is going to take place? What is that going to be like? Identifying alternate routes. The next step is think about the ways that PCs could engage with this challenge without drawing their blades. If it's a fearsome set of opponents, rational PCs will do their best to avoid fighting them unless there's some strong motivation to risk their lives in battle. Even if the PCs are dead set on murdering the target for one reason or another, they might end up looking for ways to do so safely without letting the enemy strike back. Right. So you try to engage the Goblin King when he doesn't have all his guards around. Or maybe the guards you can't help, but he's not surrounded, not in the middle of his compound. Where could you find him? Maybe you could try to poison him somehow. Maybe you could do something else. Maybe you could try to pay a couple of guards handsomely to do the job themselves, which has worked in our world more than once, is to grab somebody who is close to that person, promise them riches, promise them whatever, and then get them to do the job for you. Recognizing consequences. The villain is dead. Now what? Targets that were subordinates to some greater power are going to need to be replaced and potentially avenged if their employer liked them very much. Those with minions of their own will now see them look for new patrons and providers. Friends and family will be infuriated at the killers, while their enemies might feel a certain gratitude towards the people who perform such a favor, right? So you want to think about what happens. You've taken the Goblin King off the board. Who fills the void? Who loves you for it? Who hates you for it? And what do they all do about it? We get some complications here, a set of tables. Table number 1, what's going on right now? Table number 2, what problems do they have? Table number 3, twists about the target or their allies. So just to run through these in brief. What's going on right now? They lost a fight or had an accident and are tending their wounded. They're absorbed in eating a meal, they're arguing, they're having some sort of religious ritual, they're resting, they're training or practicing their skills, they're drinking or celebrating. So this could be a situation, the party shows up, they're maybe on the outskirts of the village undercover, someone's got a spyglass, they train it on the Goblin King's tent or pavilion or in the window of their castle, and what might they see is happening? One of those things. Maybe they're doing more, they're getting more detailed intelligence, so you might want to roll on that. What problems do they have? Some kind of ambitious underlings plotting against them. They're arguing over the fair division of some spoils. They're seriously ill with a disease. The leaders being foolish or irrational. They've been afflicted by some danger. They're out of food. This could all be fodder for planning. If there's an underling who's unhappy, again, maybe that's where you can make a deal with that underling, assuming you can get to them, right? If they're already dying, maybe somebody could just speed that along a little bit. A good, well-timed, well-pressed pillow can do wonders for things like that. And then we also have some twists about the target or their allies. They've got magic, access to magic. They have some kind of uncommon magic power. They have an unusually strong ally. The group is desperately in love with one of their underlings. They're tampering with some kind of object that's dangerous. Things of that sort. So you can give them, this is a way for you to take maybe a common enemy, right? Oh, this is the 5th Goblin King. How can I make this different? Well, these goblins have a little something extra going on. And we've got more. What's the bestial monster doing? I guess that's assuming it was a bestial monster. It's fleeing, it's patrolling, it's playing, it's starving. We have some complications for urban dwellings. Neighbors are always watching. Guards are vigilant. The living quarters are uncommonly difficult to access, right? So if the party's canvassing a castle or manor or stronghold, these are the kind of complications you might roll for. And then in the wilderness, if it's a wilderness lair, what are the complications of that? Hazardous flora, numerous deadfalls and pit-covered pits. The lair is positioned to have an excellent view of most approaches. You need to go underwater, things like that. And then if it's in the deep, it's part of a structure. Part of the structure is fragile. There's noxious gases. There's an ancient guardian. Strange ancient engines. All right, we get the idea. Okay, so this is where I'm going to stop it. So going on to, oh my gosh, I think it will be part 6. We'll begin with creating exploration challenges. So we're now into the adventure portion. So we went through if the previous parts and this part finishing up were stuff about the more basic, more general scaffolding. Now we're getting into specific scaffolding of adventures within the areas that we've already covered. Let me know if you have any questions, anything you think needs more, you like to see more of. I mentioned this before. I'll probably mention this a few times. I think it's going to be something once I'm through with all these things, or once we're through going all these things, I think we want to apply it to a Logan's Run, taking the movie Logan's Run and seeing how making a setting. And I guess since we're going now through adventure stuff, making some kind of adventure out of it. So between now and whenever we've finished these, I'm not sure how many pages left in all this stuff I have left to go. But at the end of it, we're going to go back through everything, but then we're going to work on applying it to a specific circumstance, which is me, by extension, us. We want to take the movie Logan's Run. We want to turn it into something gameable. So your single assignment between now and whenever that's finished is trying to get a hold and watch the movie Logan's Run. It's bestial. Just remember, bestiality is best. Bestiality, bestial. Okay, thanks, John Lennon, for the correction. That's not a word I speak much, so appreciate that. So not bestial, bestial. Bestiality is best. I don't know. You'll have to check that out, but I believe you. And in any case, watch Logan's Run. If somebody knows, I'll try to look it up, but I haven't looked it up yet. If it's on any particular services, I don't know if it's on demand somewhere. You should probably just pick up the DVD or Blu-ray or 4K, whatever there is of it, because I do really enjoy that movie. I might already have it, but I will check. But see if you can watch Logan's Run, because that's what I'm going to do afterwards. And I know there's a book, but I'm not going to worry about the book. Just going to do the movies. It'll be easier. It can't be more than a couple of hours, right, of time. So I feel like it's a fairly easy ask to some point during the day. Certainly I'm going to go back and take some notes, watch it. Then we're going to go through it using all the tables and stuff we've gone over in these streams to build up Logan's Run. I said at the beginning, I'll repeat here at the end. I'm going to be doing Sword Timber with Terrence from Homebrew Detritus, who was in the chat earlier. Not sure if they're still here. The first one I put up in my the community tab of the YouTube channel, also on Patreon, and I'll throw it elsewhere. The rest of them are going to be patron or channel member exclusives until we get to the end of the whole thing, in which case I think we'll try to put together some kind of book, add some extra content in there. I don't know if I was thinking, well, we could do kind of put little dungeons. That might be a lot of work, unless they're kind of 5-room dungeon setups. We'll have to see where to take it as far as putting more content around the swords. But the art that Terrence did has been awesome so far. And I think he's posted some of just the drawings in Facebook and maybe other places. And then there's that one that I posted that's got the content and the art together. So look for those. Again, if you feel like supporting the channel and you want to join the Patreon, patrons will be getting all of that stuff, as will folks who are channel members through YouTube. But you can check out that first one. It's called, what's it called? What did I call it? Gosh, look at that. My brain freeze. Was it Nightshade? I think. Man. Bad. Yep, Nightshade. Thank you. Which was the first one, Sword Timber. If you haven't familiar with it's one of these things, exercises, takes place over the month. Every day there's a different prompt. We have all the prompts already. They put all the prompts at once. You go through and you draw something that to you uses the prompt as just a jumping off point. So I think the first one, the prompt was ghostly, so we ended up with Nightshade. So check that out. On your way out, please give me a thumbs up if you can, if you like. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys hopefully tomorrow, but certainly later on with the next part in our continuing conquest of Worlds Without Number. Game on. Talk to you later.